What's up guys, we're going to be running a cross-site scripting attack and we'll also answer the question, what is a sink in the context of cross-site scripting? So we're going to be using this lab, DOM cross-site scripting in a HTML sink using source location.search. Now we see this word sink a lot. Spoiler, it has nothing to do with your kitchen sink. It really just refers to the method or function that causes the malicious JavaScript to be injected into a page. So let's quickly check out the goal of this lab. Perform a cross-site scripting attack that calls the alert function. Okay, fine, let's access the lab. As we can see, it's a blog, and we'll just fire up the DevTools and run a basic search in that search bar. So it's good to search for something fairly unique, so it's going to be easy to find it in the DOM browser. So we'll search our DOM for the injected search term, and we can see it shows up here in this span that has the ID of search message. Now just below that we have some script tags, and if we expand those we'll see some JavaScript. So let's take a moment to think about what this JavaScript is actually doing. Well, it's defining a function called doSearchQuery, which is taking a param query. Now what does this function do? It calls document.getElementById, and it's looking for the element with the ID search message. Well, we've just found that. It's this span with the ID of search message. So the JavaScript is grabbing that element, then it's calling this .innerHTML function on that element, and it probably shouldn't come as a big surprise that this sets the inner HTML of that element. In other words, we can now pass in valid HTML, and it's going to appear inside that span element. Now the question is, where does it get that query from so that it can inject it as part of the inner HTML? Well, it sets that variable next because it says variable query equals new, and then we can see it's using this URL search params class. It's looking at window.location.search. So that's basically everything in the URL after the question mark, which indicates the beginning of the query parameters. And then it's calling .get on that newly created URL search params object. Then it's pulling the value of the key search. So in this case, search equals Zenshell. Then it's saying if query. So in this case, the query is Zenshell. Then it's running that particular function, passing that query as a parameter. So in short, what's happening is it's taking our search term and it's injecting it into that span element. And we can see that we've got span ID equals search message, and then injected into that is whatever we've included as part of that query parameter with the key search. So the question is, what else can we inject into that element? Now, your first reaction might be to try and pass some kind of script tag. For example, what if we were to do something like this and say script, alert, end script tag? Seems fairly straightforward. Let's see if that gets injected into the page. And we can see no JavaScript was executed there. So let's take a look at our element and see what happened. We've got span ID equals search message, and we're seeing our script tag. It has in fact been injected, but it didn't execute. So the question is, why not? And this is where it comes down to knowing your different sinks. So in some of the previous videos, we've seen a document.write sink. This is slightly different. This is a .innerHTML sink. And one thing we need to be aware of regarding .innerHTML sinks is that if we do pass a script tag, it won't be executed. It's part of the security of the way that the browser works. But can we pass something else? For example, what if we were to pass an image tag with a source that we know would error out, and then attach the onError attribute equals JavaScript alert function? Let's see what happens if we do that. So now we're going to say image, we'll say source equals, just passing 0. This is going to error out. Then we'll say onError attribute equals alert and close our image tag. Let's see what happens now. Wow, there we go. Successful DOM-based cross-site scripting attack, making use of that inner HTML sink. And remember, it's the sink because it's the mode of transport. It's the vulnerable function that allows us to execute this malicious JavaScript. Although, of course, it's not malicious in this case, it's just an alert function. But it's proof of concept. We could pass something much more nefarious rather than just an alert function. Now, as a little bit of post-analysis here, let's just check out our modified DOM and see what happened there. Now, the easiest way to search the DOM, we could just click through everything, and we would get there eventually. The easiest thing might be to check out this image that has clearly failed to load because it had a source of 0. If we right-click on that and choose Inspect, it's going to take us immediately to the part of the DOM that we're interested in. So notice we have our span with the ID of search message, and then look at this HTML that's been injected here. Image source equals 0, on error equals alert. So although our .inner.html sync won't execute script tags, we can see if we give it an image element instead that calls a JavaScript function if it fails to load, well, now we've managed to execute some arbitrary JavaScript that could be used as part of an attack. Now just coming back to our original question regarding syncs, hopefully we can see that the sync is simply the delivery method. It's the function that allows us to execute that arbitrary JavaScript. And we call it DOM-based XSS because these syncs manipulate the DOM, and then it's the manipulated DOM that causes the JavaScript to execute. So this is different from something like reflected CSS, where the malicious JavaScript or the arbitrary JavaScript is executed because it's stored directly in the HTTP response from the server. What's happened here is slightly different. We've received the HTTP response from the server. This sync has then been executed, the inner HTML, which has modified the DOM, and then as a response to that modification, we can see that the arbitrary JavaScript has been executed. So that's also why it's DOM-based cross-site scripting rather than reflected. But this is also why DOM-based cross-site scripting has to make use of a sync or some kind of function, because it needs a function that's going to manipulate the DOM in an unsafe way. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you've learned a bit about cross-site scripting and also what is this sync that everyone keeps talking about. Hope you enjoyed the content. Thanks for watching, guys.